I think there was recently some polling done, though I don't know how like legitimate it was, polling done of Muslims in Michigan, where something like half were voting for Kamala Harris and half were voting for Jill Stein, and none of them were voting for Trump, or something like basically to that effect, which sounds about right. I mean, the fact that Jill Stein would still only land on 50-50 when Kamala Harris basically like endorses the slaughter of Palestinians is a testament to how ineffective she's been as a spoiler candidate. Oh my God, did you see Bill Clinton in Michigan talking about Gaza? Yeah, this was great, man. This was really, really, really good. Hey, listen, I know you Muslims are like still feeling salty over the whole indiscriminately slaughtering your people with U.S. weapons thing, but don't worry. We have a friend of Epstein here to sell you on the idea.
Let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis.
This is the hot, like, decisive argument that we need in Michigan 1 week before the election, where a bunch of Muslims are considering not voting for Kamala Harris. We need a, like, 80-year-old man to come down here and say, hey, did you know Hamas is bad? Really good stuff, Democrats. Really, really good stuff.
And make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was their faith existed, they were there. In the time of King David, and the southernmost tribes had Judea and Samaria.
So, this is great. This is very effective rhetoric, like right on the eve of the election, man.
So here's what I want to tell you. I'm going to do everything I can to convince people that they cannot murder their way out of this, neither side. You can't kill your way out of this. And they have to make a new beginning. But when I read that people in Michigan are thinking about not voting because they're mad at the Biden administration for honoring its historic obligation to try to keep Israel from being destroyed, I think that's a mistake. Because Donald Trump has shown what he wants. But Kamala Harris has said that she will try to negotiate an end to the violence, an end to the killing. And
guys, trust me, just one more month of negotiating the end to the violence when Netanyahu keeps openly shutting it all down. Guys, trust me, I know we've been doing this for over a year now. I know that Netanyahu has openly said he will never, ever stop. But trust me, just one more presidential administration. You want more? Fine, more, sure. Who cares, man? Let's suffer.
Let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. I have to be careful what I say because there's only one president at a time, and none of us can get ahead of where we're going. But I think we're going to have to essentially start again on the peace process. And I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But
love that. I can understand why young Muslims in Michigan think too many people have died. No, listen, okay, I'm not unreasonable. I'm sympathetic to your plight. I'm sympathetic to your concerns. I can see how some of you might naively believe that, like, 1 bajillion Palestinian babies killed by U.S. weapons might be a lot. I can see, like, your feelings on that. Your feelings are valid.
If you lived in one of those kibbutzim in Israel, right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza. And Hamas butchered them. And so then...
That music festival was on the cusp of achieving a lasting peace for both sides. Deeply regrettable.
The people who criticize it are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in Ritalin. So how many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize What would you do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians?
So he is, like, unironically, what he's saying here is, because the innocent civilians who were killed by Hamas on October 7th might not have all been openly pro-settlement, that my moral argument for the indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians is, well, how would you feel? This is, I mean, this is like openly pro-genocidal rhetoric. It's really not meaningfully different from anything Republicans say. It's rhetorically a little different because it doesn't sound as bloodthirsty, but the logic is essentially the same as when people say, like, you know, oh, you think it's wrong of us to, like, brutalize the black community in New York with stop and search, or stop and frisk and, like, unlawful searches or whatever? Well, how would you feel if you were the parents of that white girl who died in the MTA like 6 days ago or something? You know? What? This is, like, fascist rhetoric. The idea of, like, playing off people's sympathies to justify the inhuman, indiscriminate, like, retaliatory violence against the population. Even in Bill Clinton's rhetoric here, in his like argument, he is lumping in Hamas and the Palestinians. He's saying, how many of us have to die for what we did after October 7th? His words here rope in everyone, you know?
And one day they come for you and slaughter the people in your village. You would say, well, you will have to forgive me. I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't.
Oh, sorry. I know this has gone back and forth for like 80 years, but after this attack, now we have, like, no holds barred. We can do whatever we want. We're not keeping score that way. We'll kill as many babies as we have to. This is great. Thank you for bringing this guy out to speak. Really good stuff. This is going to convince a lot of young Muslims in Michigan to vote. If we lose because of Michigan, like if Michigan goes red on these margins, the Democrats earned it, they deserve it, and it's all their fault. Sorry, this goes to no one else. If Jill Stein is successful in pulling away enough of this, like, demographic in order to shift Michigan to red, it is 100% Democrats. I'm not blaming Jill Stein either. Like, Jill Stein may have been a plant by Russia to facilitate right-wing interests, but, like, this is an unforced error from the Democrats. It's pretty much impossible to blame anyone but them for this one.
How many we've had to kill. Because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded.
Not to mention, this guy is probably the main reason that Democrats never talk about Epstein in public.
They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself.
One of the things that we have been letting people know, and I want to really thank Abandon Harris for having the courage to say this, right? We want them to lose.
I'm sorry, I gotta blame the Dems if they lose to this gambit. Like, if you lose to the universe's most obvious psyop, that dude is cosplaying, right? No. That's Jill Stein's campaign manager. I know liberals are cringe, but never trust leftists who hate liberals more than fascists. Well, they're not leftists. They're usually fascists. Basically, every single online, and they're always online, every single online, like, community group or space that has done the whole, like, I don't care who suffers, the Dems need to lose, it doesn't matter if Trump wins, basically all of them are reactionaries. If you take a look at their rhetoric holistically, you know? They're either paid propagandists, usually like Russia Tide. They lie, like they put forward the same lies the same way, you know? Or they're just reactionaries and they want, like, an edgier, cooler reason to be reactionaries. Can we still make fun of the Green Party? I mean, if the Green Party cost the Democrats Michigan, I think you should primarily, like, make fun of the Democrats. Zigabiz, I don't know why every time this subject comes up, you're like you're in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and you're on a keto diet, you know? Don't you think if instead of a river of chocolate, this was a river of bacon fat, that would be better for people's blood sugar in the long run? Like, you're I don't understand the poll. Because you love to pretend there was an easy way for them to avoid what happened. I've literally never said that. You're shadowboxing. I've never said this was an easy thing to avoid. If you're watching Bill Clinton unironically endorse a genocide, and your response is like, well, what would you have done? You're engaging in fascist apologia as well. I have never pretended that it would have been easy. I've done like multiple videos where I've said like it would have been really difficult to challenge Israel in a way that didn't prompt a whole bunch of like accusations of anti-Semitism, but Biden's strategy of just doing whatever Netanyahu wants, offering no pushback, drawing red lines, and abandoning them was like the worst possible way to handle it, because now Netanyahu has been given like infinite credence to decide. Like, you're being disingenuous. I don't know why you're so harped up on this subject. Like, does no one else think it's really, 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 really weird that Democrats have essentially bent the knee to AIPAC spending when AIPAC is an objectively right-wing PAC? Like, in what other context would we not think that's weird? Like, you know, oh, Democrats have adopted 57 different rhetorical, you know, strategies in order to work around the incentives provided by AIPAC spending. Because I've yet to hear of a right way or right response when I have to say, okay, Zigabiz, you understand how you're in the wrong on this one, right? Like, you can't, every time the genocide, like Hitler 2 comes up, you can't be like, well, how would you have beat Hitler 2? Here, I'm gonna do what the Dems should have done to AIPAC, and I'm going to make sure that you're not an influence on the election. No, Vosh, I've heard moral arguments that I agree with. Yeah, but you're doing, what's the term? Sea lioning. That's the term, right? Where like, this is the 5 millionth time this has come up, and every time, even though the subject's been discussed, you're like, well, how would you have stopped it? Like, you're not arguing from a pragmatic perspective. You're arguing from a moral one, because nobody argues this insistently from a pragmatic perspective. You think it's morally wrong to challenge the rhetoric on this. Otherwise, you wouldn't care. Sea lining is such a stupid term. It happens all the time. No, I think it's counterproductive. I think that this is counterproductive. And I think you're being disingenuous. It's like every time with that guy. And it's never even the like, I disagree with what you're saying now. It's like the, I broadly don't think you've appropriately addressed the such and such. I think it's unproductive of you to point out the objectively awful, morally wrong. Like, are you suggesting that there would have been political consequences to Bill Clinton not coming out in Michigan and saying this awful shit? Like, AIPAC would have ruined Kamala's chances right on the eve of the election if they hadn't booked Bill Clinton for this? Like, what are you talking? It's concern trolling. Off. Okay, enough of that. Don't make yourself up next, ENG. Don't put yourself up next on the stage. I'll get you too.